close your eyes and let yourself settle into comfort. Tonight, we journey back through the centuries to explore one of humanity's most persistent challenges, the quiet, almost invisible struggle to capture time itself. Before the gentle tick of clocks marked our hours, before digital displays counted our minutes, there existed a world where time moved differently, a world where the rhythm of life followed older, more natural patterns. Tonight, you'll walk through villages where church bells were the only timekeeper most people ever knew, where the sun's arc across the sky determined when to work and when to rest. Imagine yourself drifting back through history, leaving behind our precisely measured world of schedules and deadlines. You're entering an age where time was something felt rather than counted, experienced rather than tracked. The air around you grows cooler, carrying the sense of wood smoke and damp earth. The familiar hum of modern machinery fades, replaced by the distant lowing of cattle and the whisper of wind through grain fields. This is the story of how humans tried to hold time in their hands, through shadow and flame, through flowing water and turning gears. It's a story of monks rising in darkness, of nobles displaying mechanical marvels, and of countless ordinary people who live their entire lives guided by nothing more precise than the sun's journey across the sky. Let yourself sink deeper into relaxation as we begin this gentle exploration of time itself in an age when time moved at the pace of prayer of seasons and of the eternal rhythm that has guided human life since the beginning. The morning begins not with an alarm clock, but with the gradual lightening of the sky through your small, shuttered window. You are a villager in medieval Europe, perhaps in the year 1200, and your day unfolds according to rhythms that have remained unchanged for generations. Imagine yourself stirring on your straw mattress as the first pale light creeps across the rough wooden walls of your home. There is no clock face to consult, no precise moment when you must rise. Instead, your body responds to the ancient signals, the changing quality of light, the stirring of birds, the distant sound of your neighbors beginning their day. Time, for you, is not a number, but a feeling, a gradual awareness that the world is awakening. The air in your small dwelling is cool and still, carrying the lingering sense of yesterday's cooking fire and the sweet mustiness of dried herbs hanging from the rafters. You can hear the soft breathing of your family members nearby, their sleep still deep and unhurried. There is no urgency here, no frantic checking of minutes or seconds. The day will unfold as it always has, guided by necessity and tradition, than the tyranny of precise measurement. As you rise and move about your morning tasks, you become aware of the sounds that structure your world. From somewhere across the village comes the gentle lowing of cattle being led to pasture. The rhythm is steady, unhurried, the same rhythm that has marked mornings in this place for countless generations. A dog barks in the distance, not with alarm, but with the casual acknowledgement of another day beginning. Your morning routine flows without the constraint of measured time. You splash water from a wooden basin onto your face, the coolness sharp and awakening. The water carries the clean, mineral taste of the village well, drawn up from depths that remain constant regardless of the hour. You dress in simple, practical clothing, rough wool and linen, that will serve you through a day of work that begins when there is light enough to see and ends when darkness makes labor impossible. The rhythm of your morning is punctuated by the first great marker of village time, the ringing of the church bell. The sound rolls across the settlement like a gentle wave, its bronze voice calling the faithful to the first prayers of the day. This is prime, one of the canonical hours that divides the day for those who live by religious observance. But for you, it simply means that morning has officially arrived, that the community is stirring, that the day's work can begin in earnest. You step outside your dwelling and into a world where time moves at the pace of human footsteps. The village street is narrow and unpaved, soft with centuries of foot traffic and the organic debris of daily life. The air carries the complex perfume of a community that lives close to the earth, with smoke from cooking fires, the warm scent of animals, the green fragrance of herbs and grain, and underneath it all, the rich aroma of soil that has been cultivated and loved for generations. Other villagers are emerging from their homes, and you exchange the quiet greetings of people who have known each other since birth. There is no hurry in these interactions, no glancing at timepieces or mentions of being late. Conversation flows naturally, shaped by the immediate concerns of weather, crops, and community. Someone mentions that the miller's wheel was grinding late into the evening yesterday. You can measure time by such things, by the familiar sounds and sights that mark the passage of days. The work of your morning begins with the feeding of animals. You make your way to the small enclosure behind your home where chickens scratch and peck in their eternal search for sustenance. Their movements are random yet purposeful, following instincts that have nothing to do with human measurements of time. You scatter grain with the same unhurried motion your ancestors used, watching as the birds respond with their quick, darting movements and soft, contented clucking. As you work, the sun climbs higher, and you can feel its growing warmth on your shoulders. This is your most reliable timekeeper, not the position of hands on a dial, but the changing angle of light and shadow, the shifting quality of warmth on your skin. The sun's journey across the sky is the great clock that governs your world, though you would never think to measure its progress in minutes or even hours. The bell rings again, calling the religious to the service of terce, the third hour of prayer. The sound drifts across the village like incense, marking another division in the day. But these divisions are broad and forgiving, allowing for the natural variations in human energy and attention. There is no sense that every moment must be accounted for, no anxiety about productivity or efficiency in our modern sense. Your morning continues with a visit to the village well, where you join other members of the community in the daily ritual of drawing water. The well is more than a source of sustenance. It's a gathering place, a center of information and social connection. Here, you learn that the harvest in the next village was particularly good this year, that a traveling merchant is expected before the next full moon, that someone's child is recovering from a fever. These conversations unfold without the pressure of schedules or appointments. Time exists, but it breathes, expanding and contracting according to the natural flow of human interaction. You might spend a few minutes or half an hour at the well, depending on who you encounter and what news they bring. The bucket descends into the cool darkness below, and when it returns, filled with clear water, you have participated in a ritual that connects you to every generation that has drawn from this same source. The water itself tells a story of time, not the mechanical time of gears and springs, but the geological time of rain and earth, of slow filtration through layers of stone and soil. It tastes of minerals and depth, of processes that unfold over decades and centuries rather than seconds and minutes. When you drink, you taste the patience of the earth itself. As the morning progresses toward what we might call midday, though you would think of it simply as the sun's highest point, the rhythm of village life continues its ancient pattern. You tend to your small garden plot, where vegetables grow according to their own internal clocks, the slow swelling of roots, the gradual unfurling of leaves, the patient development of seeds into sustenance. Working in the soil connects you to time in its most fundamental form. Your hands, dark with earth, plant seeds that will not mature for months, 10 plants that have been growing for weeks, harvest vegetables that have been developing since spring. This is time as nature measures it, not in discrete units, but in continuous cycles of growth, maturity, and renewal. The sun reaches its zenith, and though you have no way to measure the precise moment, your body knows. The heat on your head and shoulders tells you that the day has reached its turning point. Soon, the church bell will ring for sext, the 6th hour, what the learned call midday. But you don't need the bell to know. Your shadow has shrunk to a small pool at your feet, and the light has taken on that particular quality that speaks of noon. You pause in your work and look around at your village, at this community where life unfolds according to rhythms older than memory. The baker's oven sends a thin stream of smoke into the still air, bread being prepared for the day's main meal. Children play in the dust between houses, They're games requiring no scheduling, no careful allocation of minutes. They play until they grow tired or hungry, then rest, then play again. This is time as humans experienced it for millennia, before the invention of mechanical precision. Time is a river, rather than a series of discrete drops. Time is breath, rather than heartbeats. Your day continues to unfold in this gentle, unmeasured way, each task flowing naturally into the next, each moment expanding to contain whatever it needs to contain. The morning becomes afternoon without sharp definition, marked not by the movement of clock hands, but by the subtle changes in light and temperature, by the shifting patterns of shadow and warmth, by the gradual accumulation of small tasks completed and small satisfactions earned. You live within time, other than racing against it, part of a rhythm that connects you to the earth, to the seasons, to the vast, patient cycles that govern all life. In this world without precise timekeeping, you discover something that our modern age has largely forgotten, that time can be generous rather than demanding, spacious rather than cramped, a friend rather than a master. Your life unfolds according to its own internal logic, shaped by need and tradition, by the requirements of survival and the simple pleasure of living in harmony with the natural world. As the afternoon light begins its gentle descent toward evening in your village, let us drift away from the earthen streets and simple dwellings, traveling now to a place where time itself is about to be transformed. Imagine yourself approaching the thick stone walls of a monastery, perhaps in the Germanic lands of the late 13th century, where the rhythm of prayer has governed life for centuries, and where human ingenuity is about to create something that will forever change how we measure our days. The monastery of St. Gallen, or perhaps it is the Abbey at Wells, or one of the countless other religious communities scattered across medieval Europe. The exact location matters less than the atmosphere of quiet dedication that pervades these sacred spaces. Here, behind walls of dressed stone that have stood for generations, a revolution is taking place so quietly that even those creating it barely understand its eventual significance. Picture yourself walking through the main gate, your footsteps echoing softly in the vaulted entrance hall. The air here is different from the village, cooler, more still, carrying the lingering fragrances of incense, old parchment, and the particular stillness that comes from lives devoted to contemplation. The stone walls seem to hold silence the way they hold warmth, creating an environment where the smallest sounds take on significance. You are here to meet Brother Gerhardus. Though his name might be different, the individual matters less than the type. The dedicated craftsman monk whose hands are about to give birth to mechanical time. He is a man of perhaps 40 years, his face weathered by countless hours of concentrated work, his fingers stained with the oils and metals of his craft. When you meet him in his workshop, you discover someone who thinks about time in ways that would seem almost heretical to those outside these monastery walls. Brother Gerhardus moves through his workshop with the measured pace of someone who has learned to work with patience as his primary tool. The room around him is filled with the organized complexity of a medieval craftsman's space, workbenches scarred by years of use, walls lined with tools whose purposes you can barely imagine, and scattered throughout, the gleaming components of something that has never existed before, a clock that will mark time through purely mechanical means. The prayers, he explains to you in a voice roughened by years of contemplative silence, broken only for necessity. They must be precise. Prime at the first light, terse when the sun has climbed a quarter of its path, sext at midday. His hands gesture as he speaks, and you notice how they move with the same careful precision he brings to his metal work. But how can we know, truly know, when these moments arrive? The sun hides behind clouds. The seasons change its path. We need something more reliable, something that carries its own rhythm. The problem Brother Gerhardus describes is one that has plagued monastic communities for centuries. The rule of St. Benedict, which governs life in monasteries across Europe, requires 7 specific times of prayer throughout each day. But marking these times with accuracy has always been a challenge. Sundials fail on cloudy days, and become useless in winter's shortened daylight. Water clocks freeze or overflow. Candle clocks burn differently in summer's heat and winter's cold. You watch as Brother Gerhardus lifts a piece of worked iron, examining it with the intense focus of someone whose spiritual practice has become inseparable from his craft. This is part of what he calls his escapement, a word he has coined for a mechanism that will allow stored energy to release itself bit by bit, creating the steady, measured intervals that will drive his mechanical clock. The concept is simultaneously simple and revolutionary. Imagine a weight suspended on a cord, wanting to fall toward the earth as all things do. But instead of falling freely, its descent is controlled by a series of gears and wheels, each one carefully calculated to slow and regulate the weight's journey downward. The energy of gravity, captured and parceled out in precise intervals, becomes the heartbeat of mechanical time. Watch, Brother Gerhardus says, and his voice carries the quiet excitement of someone who has glimpsed something new in the world. He demonstrates with a small working model, a miniature version of the great clock he's building for the monastery's tower. As the weight descends, you hear it, a soft, rhythmic sound that has never existed before in human history. Tick dot dot, tick dot dot, tick dot dot. The mechanical division of time into identical, measured intervals. The sound is hypnotic in its regularity, like a metallic heartbeat that never varies, never hurries, never slows. It speaks of time not as the flowing river you knew in the village, but as something that can be divided, controlled, made uniform. Each tick represents the same interval as every other tick, a revolutionary concept that will eventually reshape how humans understand their relationship to time itself. Brother Gerhardus explains how the mechanism works, his voice taking on the cadence of someone who has thought deeply about every component. The weight provides the power, falling slowly under gravity's patient pull. A series of carefully cut gear wheels transfers and regulates this power. But the true innovation is the escapement, a device that allows the energy to escape one small portion at a time, creating the steady rhythm that will mark the hours. The beauty, he says, running his finger along a brass gear wheel, lies not in complexity, but in constancy. This device will mark time whether the sun shines or not, whether winter shortens the days or summer extends them. It cares nothing for weather, nothing for seasons. It simply counts. You can hear in his voice both pride and something that might be apprehension. Brother Gerhardus is creating something that will free humanity from dependence on natural timekeepers. But he is also creating something that will impose a new kind of order on human life, the order of mechanical precision. The workshop around you tells the story of years of experimentation. On one table lies a series of gear wheels, each one filed by hand, each tooth carefully shaped to mesh perfectly with its neighbors. The work is incredibly demanding. A single gear wheel might require weeks to complete, and if even one tooth is improperly cut, the entire mechanism will fail. Brother Gerhardus shows you the marks on his workbench, where he has tested countless combinations of gear ratios, searching for the perfect relationship between the fall of the weight and the passage of time. It must match the sundial at noon, he explains, when the shadow is shortest and the sun at its highest point. All other hours must be equal to this standard. This pursuit of mechanical accuracy represents a fundamental shift in human thinking about time. For millennia, people had accepted that hours might vary in length, longer in summer, shorter in winter, as the sun's daily journey expanded and contracted with the seasons. But Brother Gerhardus and his fellow clockmakers are creating hours of absolutely uniform length, hours that remain constant regardless of season or weather. The monastery's abbot visits the workshop occasionally, a tall man whose face carries the weight of administrative responsibility. He understands that what Brother Gerhardus is creating will benefit the community's spiritual life, ensuring that prayers are offered at proper intervals. But like the craftsman himself, the abbot seems to sense that this innovation carries implications beyond their small monastic world. The bells, the abbot muses during one visit, They will ring with perfect regularity. The brothers will know precisely when to gather for prayer. He pauses, watching the slow, steady movement of the experimental clock. But what of the people in the villages? They will hear our bells differently now. They will begin to expect this same precision in their own lives. The great clock nears completion over months of painstaking work. Brother Gerhardus installs it in the monastery's tower, a position where its bell can be heard throughout the surrounding countryside. The mechanism is surprisingly simple in appearance, a wooden frame housing the brass and iron components, with ropes hanging down to the weights that will power its movement. But when it begins to run, when its escapement begins to mark its steady rhythm, something changes in the monastery's atmosphere. The bells now ring with mathematical precision. Prime arrives at exactly the same interval after midnight every day. Terce follows at precisely the correct moment. The entire rhythm of monastic life becomes regulated by the patient tick of mechanical gears. You spend several days in the monastery, listening to the new sound that punctuates the ancient rhythms of prayer and contemplation. The clock's voice is subtle but insistent, not the dramatic chiming that will characterize later timepieces, but a quiet, continuous marking of moments that creates an entirely new backdrop to human activity. The monks adapt to this new precision with varying degrees of enthusiasm. Some appreciate the certainty it brings to their spiritual discipline. Others miss the gentle flexibility of time read by sun and season. Brother Gerhardus himself seems both satisfied and slightly melancholic as he watches his creation mark time with its relentless accuracy. "I have built something," he tells you during one evening's conversation, "that will outlive me, outlive all of us. Long after we are gone, it will continue counting, marking the passage of time, whether anyone is here to listen or not." His voice carries the strange mixture of pride and unease that often accomplish true innovation. As you prepare to leave the monastery, to return to the flowing, organic time of the village, you carry with you the sound of that mechanical heartbeat. Tick dot dot, tick dot dot, tick dot dot. It follows you beyond the monastery walls, a reminder that humans have begun to cage time itself, to transform the patient river of natural duration into the measured droplets of mechanical precision. The revolution has begun quietly, in workshops like Brother Gerhardus's, tended by craftsmen whose dedication to spiritual discipline has led them to create something that will ultimately transform the spiritual and practical life of all humanity. Time itself is about to become something different, something counted rather than felt, measured rather than experienced, controlled rather than simply accepted. And yet, as you drift away from the monastery and its revolutionary timekeeper, you can still hear beneath the mechanical ticking the older rhythms that have always governed human life. The whisper of wind through grain fields, the patient lowing of cattle, the soft breathing of those who sleep without concern for the precise measurement of their rest. Let yourself drift now, further back through the centuries, beyond the medieval monastery with its revolutionary gears, beyond the village with its gentle bells. We journey now into the deeper past, to civilizations that rose and fell while wrestling with the same fundamental question that has haunted humanity since consciousness first stirred. How do we capture time? How do we hold something so elusive, so essential, so utterly beyond our grasp? The sun beats down on limestone steps, worn smooth by countless sandaled feet. You find yourself in ancient Egypt, perhaps near Memphis, in the shadow of pyramids that have already stood for 1,000 years. The air shimmers with heat, and the stone beneath your feet radiates warmth that speaks of centuries of accumulated sunlight. Here, in this land where the Nile's annual flood has regulated human life since before memory, the first serious attempts to measure time have left their marks in stone and shadow. Before you stands one of humanity's earliest timepieces, a gnomon, a simple vertical stick casting its shadow across a carefully marked stone surface. The sundial that surrounds it is elegant in its simplicity, its hour lines carved with the precision that characterizes Egyptian craftsmanship. Yet as you examine this ancient timekeeper, you begin to understand both the ingenuity and the limitations that drove human beings to seek ever more sophisticated ways to measure their days. The shadow moves with imperceptible slowness, creeping across the carved lines, like a patient finger tracing the passage of time itself. An Egyptian priest approaches, his linen robes rustling softly in the warm air. His name might be Keti, and his face bears the serene expression of someone who has spent decades observing the celestial patterns that govern earthly life. "Watch the shadow," he says, his voice carrying the gentle authority of long practice. "See how it shortens as Ra climbs toward his throne at midday, then lengthens again as he begins his journey toward the western mountains. His gesture encompasses not just the sundial before you, but the entire relationship between earth and sky that makes such timekeeping possible." Keti explains how the sundial must be carefully oriented. It's no one pointed toward the celestial pole. It's our lines calculated according to the sun's seasonal variations. In summer, he notes, the shadow traces a different path than in winter. The hours themselves grow longer and shorter as the year turns. This variability, which seems like a flaw to modern minds, was simply accepted as part of the natural order by ancient peoples. You spend time with Keti as he tends to various timepieces scattered throughout the temple complex. Each serves a different purpose, adapted to different needs and conditions. Near the sanctuary stands a water clock, what the Greeks will later call a clepsydra. Its bronze bowl carefully calibrated to drain at a steady rate regardless of the sun's position. The water clock fascinates you with its gentle, almost hypnotic operation. Water flows from a small hole in the bottom of a marked container, and as the level drops, it reveals our markings carved into the inner surface. The sound is barely audible, a soft, irregular dripping that creates its own rhythm, entirely different from the mechanical precision you heard in Brother Gerhardus's workshop centuries in the future. This serves us when Ra hides his face, Keti explains, gesturing toward the clouds that occasionally obscure the sun. And in the depths of night, when shadows cannot guide us, the water clock represents humanity's first step toward independence from celestial timepieces, though it brings its own challenges. The flow rate changes with temperature, the small opening clogs with debris, and the device requires constant attention and adjustment. As evening approaches, Keti leads you to another corner of the temple complex where a different approach to timekeeping awaits. Here, carefully arranged on a stone platform, are candles of precise dimensions, marked with lines that divide their length into measured intervals. Fire time, Keti calls it, and you watch as he lights one of these temporal candles with practiced ceremony. The flame burns steadily, consuming the wax at a rate that has been carefully calibrated through generations of observation. As the candle burns down to each marked line, another hour's passed. The light flickers gently in the evening air, casting dancing shadows that seem to mock the very precision the device is meant to provide. Yet there is something deeply satisfying about this marriage of practical timekeeping with the ancient human comfort of firelight. Our ancestors, Keti tells you, as you watch the candle burn, mark time by the flooding of the Nile, by the rising of Sirius in the dawn sky, by the great cycles that repeat themselves across generations. His voice carries a note of something that might be lost. We have learned to divide these great rhythms into smaller pieces, to count the passage of moments rather than seasons. But sometimes I wonder if we have gained precision only to lose something more precious. You leave ancient Egypt and drift further east, carried by currents of time and imagination to ancient China, where a different approach to temporal measurement has evolved in parallel with Egyptian innovations. Here, in a courtyard surrounded by wooden buildings with gracefully curved roofs, you encounter incense clocks, perhaps the most poetic of all ancient timepieces. The Chinese artisan who greets you, let us call him Master Liu, moves with the measured grace of someone whose craft requires infinite patience. Before him lies a wooden mold filled with powdered incense, carefully shaped into intricate patterns that will burn for precisely measured intervals. The fragrance that rises from his work carries hints of sandalwood, cedar, and exotic spices that speak of trade routes stretching across continents. Time, Master Liu explains as he works, should engage all the senses. Why measure only with sight when we can also measure with scent? The incense clock he is creating will burn in a slow, steady spiral, its glowing edge creeping through the aromatic powder like a gentle fuse. Different sections of the spiral contain different fragrances, so that the passage of time becomes a journey through a landscape of scent. You watch, mesmerized, as Master Liu demonstrates a completed incense clock. The glowing point of combustion moves almost imperceptibly through the powder, leaving behind a trail of ash and releasing clouds of fragrant smoke that drift lazily in the still air. This clock, he says, will burn for exactly 12 hours, and each hour will announce itself with its own distinctive perfume. The incense clock represents something unique in the history of timekeeping, the recognition that measuring time need not be merely functional, but can also be beautiful, even spiritual. As you sit in Master Liu's courtyard, breathing the gentle succession of fragrances that mark the passage of hours, you understand how time measurement could become a form of meditation, a way of connecting with temporal flow rather than simply monitoring it. Master Liu shows you other variations of his craft: incense seals that burn in complex patterns, powdered clocks that can be customized for any desired interval, and even incense calendars that mark not just hours, but days and months. Each represents a different philosophy of time, a different way of understanding humanity's relationship with duration and change. In the West, Master Liu observes, I am told they build devices with gears and weights, machines that count time like a merchant counts coins. His tone suggests no criticism, merely a different way of seeing. We prefer time that breathes, that carries beauty along with its measurement. Your journey through ancient timekeeping carries you next to the sophisticated civilizations of Mesopotamia, where water clocks reached extraordinary levels of precision and complexity. In Babylon, you encounter astronomical timepieces that integrate celestial observation with flowing water, creating devices that can account for the seasonal variations that plague simpler sundials. The Babylonian water clocks represent the intersection of practical timekeeping with mathematical sophistication. Their creators understood that equal hours of consistent length throughout the year, required complex compensation for the sun's seasonal variations. They developed elaborate systems of weights and floats, adjustable outlets, and calibrated scales, all designed to create temporal measurement that remained consistent regardless of season. You spend time in a Babylonian temple, watching priest astronomers tend to their intricate water clocks. The devices are architectural in their complexity, with multiple chambers, connecting tubes, and adjustment mechanisms that allow them to be recalibrated for different times of year. The sound of flowing water creates a constant, gentle background, not the steady tick of mechanical gears, but the organic murmur of liquid finding its level. These ancient timepieces reveal something profound about humanity's relationship with time. Unlike the mechanical clocks that will eventually follow, water clocks and sundials and incense timepieces remain connected to natural processes. They measure time by harnessing natural flows, the movement of shadows, the behavior of liquids, the combustion of organic materials. They represent time as participation in natural rhythms, rather than independence from them, but they also reveal the limitations that drove human innovation forward. Every sundial fails on cloudy days. Every water clock freezes in winter or evaporates in extreme heat. Every incense clock burns differently in different atmospheric conditions. The quest for reliable, consistent timekeeping pushes human ingenuity toward increasingly complex solutions, each one attempting to overcome the variability that characterizes natural processes. As you drift through these ancient approaches to temporal measurement, you begin to understand that the story of timekeeping is also the story of humanity's evolving relationship with nature itself. The earliest timepieces worked with natural rhythms, accepting their variability as simply part of the temporal experience. Later innovations sought to overcome natural limitation, to create measurement systems that could operate independently of weather, season, and environmental condition. The progression is subtle but significant. The simple shadow stick accepts that hours might vary with the seasons. The sophisticated sundial attempts to compensate for seasonal variation while remaining dependent on sunshine. The water clock seeks independence from celestial conditions but remains vulnerable to temperature and atmospheric pressure. The incense clock creates temporal beauty but struggles with consistency. Each approach reflects its culture's understanding of time itself. The Egyptians, governed by the Nile's annual cycle, created timepieces that acknowledged seasonal variation. The Chinese, with their sophisticated understanding of natural harmony, developed temporal measurement that engaged multiple senses and celebrated the aesthetic dimension of duration. The Babylonians, with their mathematical precision, sought to impose mathematical regularity on natural processes. Yet all of these ancient approaches share something that will be lost with the advent of mechanical timekeeping, a recognition that time measurement should remain connected to the natural world, that the devices we use to count our hours should somehow participate in the same cosmic rhythms they attempt to measure. As you prepare to drift forward again through history, toward the age of mechanical precision, you carry with you the memory of these older approaches to time. The gentle drip of water finding its level, the slow spiral of fragrant smoke, the patient creep of shadows across stone. These represent humanity's first attempts to hold time in our hands, while still acknowledging its essential mystery. In the distance, you can almost hear the future approaching, the tick of gears, the chime of mechanical bells, the relentless precision of artificial timekeepers that will revolutionize human life, while perhaps losing something essential about our relationship with duration itself. But for now, in this space between ancient wisdom and mechanical innovation, you rest in the gentle rhythms of water and shadow, incense and firelight, finding in these simple timepieces a kind of temporal peace that mechanical precision may never quite recapture. As the gentle smoke of Master Liu's incense clock fades from memory, let yourself drift forward through time once more, moving past the experimental workshops of medieval monasteries toward an age when mechanical timekeeping has begun to spread beyond religious communities. You find yourself approaching a very different world, one where the ability to measure time precisely has become not merely practical but political, not simply useful but symbolic of power itself. The year might be 1370, and you are walking through the gates of a great castle somewhere in the prosperous regions of Flanders or northern Italy. The cobblestones beneath your feet have been worn smooth by countless hooves and wagon wheels, polished by decades of wealth flowing in and out of these fortified walls. The air carries the complex sense of a community where money and power concentrate, exotic spices from distant trade routes, fine leather from the best artisans, the metallic tang of well-maintained weapons, and underneath it all, the particular atmosphere of a place where every detail has been calculated to display status and authority. You have come to witness something unprecedented in human history, the installation of a mechanical clock, not for the practical needs of prayer or commerce, but as a statement of prestige, a mechanical demonstration of wealth and sophistication that will tower over the surrounding countryside and announce to all who can see or hear it that this lord possesses something remarkable, something that transforms time itself into an instrument of social dominance. The castle's great hall buzzes with carefully controlled excitement as servants prepare for the arrival of the clockmaker and his extraordinary creation. Lord Heinrich, though his name might be different, his type is consistent across the emerging merchant aristocracy of late medieval Europe, moves through his domain with the satisfaction of someone about to acquire something that will set him apart from his peers and competitors. Lord Heinrich is a man whose wealth comes not from ancient bloodlines, but from the new opportunities created by expanding trade and urban growth. His grandfather might have been a successful merchant. His father elevated their family's status through careful marriages and strategic investments. Now Heinrich himself seeks to establish his family's position among the true nobility through displays of sophistication that money alone can provide. The mechanical clock he has commissioned represents months of negotiation and enormous expense. Master Johannes, the clockmaker, has travelled from Prague or Paris or one of the other centres where the new craft of mechanical timekeeping is developing. He arrives with a train of assistants, carefully packed components, and the air of someone who creates objects that border on the magical. You watch as Master Johannes oversees the installation of the great clock in the castle's highest tower. The mechanism itself is a marvel of brass and iron, its gears cut with precision that represents the finest craftsmanship available in this age. But what truly sets this timepiece apart is not its mechanical sophistication, but its artistic elaboration. The case has been carved and gilded, decorated with heraldic symbols and religious imagery, transformed from a mere measuring device into a work of art that proclaims its owner's taste and resources. Time. Master Johannes explains to Lord Heinrich they examine the completed installation, has always belonged to God and nature. But now, my lord, you possess time itself. Your clock will mark the hours for everyone who lives within sound of its bells, but only you control when those bells ring. Only you own the mechanism that creates temporal order. The political implications of private timekeeping are profound, though they unfold slowly and subtly. For centuries, time has been communal property, marked by church bells, measured by public sundials, shared equally among all members of society regardless of their wealth or status. But mechanical clocks, with their enormous cost and technical complexity, can be owned only by the wealthy, creating for the first time in human history the possibility that time itself might become a form of private property. Lord Heinrich's clock transforms the rhythm of life throughout his domain. The castle's routine now follows mechanical precision rather than natural flow. Meals served at exactly determined intervals, court sessions beginning and ending with clockwork regularity. The entire pattern of aristocratic life organized according to artificial rather than organic time. The effect extends beyond the castle walls. Village communities within hearing distance of the great clock gradually adjust their own rhythms to match its mechanical beat. Market days begin not when the sun reaches a certain angle, but when the castle clock strikes a predetermined hour. Legal proceedings follow temporal schedules, imposed by mechanical rather than human judgment. But even as Lord Heinrich's clock imposes its mechanical order on the surrounding countryside, you can observe the persistence of older temporal patterns among those who have no choice but to live according to natural rhythms. Beyond the reach of the castle's bells, in villages too distant to hear the hourly chimes, life continues to flow according to the ancient patterns of sunrise and sunset, seasonal variation, and natural necessity. You spend time in one such village, perhaps a day's journey from the castle, where the innovations of mechanical timekeeping remain abstract rumors rather than daily realities. Here, the blacksmith still begins his work when there is sufficient light to see his anvil clearly, and ends when darkness makes precision impossible. The baker rises not at a predetermined hour, but when her internal rhythms and the needs of her customers dictate. Children play until they grow tired or hungry, with no reference to external temporal authority. The contrast is striking and poignant. In the castle, servants rush to complete tasks before specified deadlines, their work governed by the artificial precision of mechanical measurement. In the village, work flows according to its own internal logic, expanding and contracting according to seasonal demands, weather conditions, and human energy levels. Yet even the village cannot remain entirely isolated from the temporal revolution taking place in centers of wealth and power. Traveling merchants arrive according to schedules increasingly determined by mechanical rather than natural time. Legal summons specify appearances at hours defined by mechanical clocks rather than solar positions. The apparatus of growing governmental authority begins to operate according to artificial temporal precision. You witness a moment that captures the tension between these different approaches to time when a messenger from Lord Heinrich's court arrives in the village with a legal summons. "You are commanded to appear," he announces to a startled peasant, "at the hour of terce on Thursday next, when the castle clock shall strike the 3rd hour after prime." The peasant's confusion is evident. He knows Thursday, the market day that falls between the middle of the week and the approach of the weekend. But the hour of terce means nothing to someone whose life follows solar rather than mechanical rhythms. When the sun stands thus high above the horizon, he asks, gesturing toward the sky, or when it has moved to this position, the messenger's impatience reveals the growing gap between those who live by mechanical time and those who remain governed by natural patterns. "The clock strikes," he says, as if this explanation should suffice. "When you hear the bells from the castle, count the strokes. 3 strokes after the morning bell signals the hour of your appearance." This exchange illustrates how mechanical timekeeping becomes an instrument of social control, as well as convenience. Those who own clocks can impose temporal discipline, as those who do not. Legal systems, commercial arrangements, and governmental operations increasingly assume universal access to precise timekeeping, creating disadvantages for those who cannot afford such devices or who live beyond their reach. Back in the castle, Lord Heinrich entertains guests who have come to admire his remarkable timepiece. These visitors represent the emerging class of wealthy merchants, successful artisans, and minor nobility who are beginning to recognize that mechanical timekeeping offers not just practical advantages, but social distinction. The ability to keep time becomes a mark of sophistication, a way of distinguishing oneself from those who remain bound by natural rhythms. The conversation in Lord Heinrich's great hall reveals the complex motivations behind the spread of mechanical timekeeping among the wealthy. "My clock," Lord Heinrich explains to his guests, "ensures that my household operates with the efficiency that commerce demands. No longer do we waste precious daylight hours waiting for servants to judge when tasks should begin. Every moment is accounted for, every activity scheduled with precision, but beneath the practical justifications lies something deeper, the psychological satisfaction of controlling time itself." Lord Heinrich's guests examine the clock's mechanism with the fascination of people encountering something that seems to border on magic. The steady tick of the escapement, the measured movement of weights and gears, the precisely calibrated striking of hours, all of this represents human mastery over one of nature's most fundamental forces. "Time," observes one of Heinrich's guests, a wealthy merchant from Florence, "has always been our master. We wake when the sun commands, work when weather permits, rest when darkness falls. But this device reverses the relationship. Now we command time, forcing it to serve our purposes, rather than constraining our activities to its natural patterns." The philosophical implications of this reversal are profound, though they will not be fully understood for centuries. By creating artificial time that operates independently of natural cycles, mechanical clockmakers and their wealthy patrons are fundamentally altering humanity's relationship with the natural world. Time becomes something to be consumed rather than experienced, managed rather than accepted, owned rather than shared. Yet even as Lord Heinrich and his peers celebrate their conquest of temporal precision, the limitations and costs of mechanical timekeeping become apparent. The great clock requires constant maintenance. Weights must be wound, mechanisms must be cleaned and oiled, broken components must be repaired by specialists whose skills are rare and expensive. What initially appeared as mastery over time reveals itself as a new form of dependency. Dependency on complex machinery, technical expertise, and the financial resources required to maintain artificial precision. The castle's daily routine, organized around mechanical rather than natural rhythms, sometimes conflicts with human needs and natural patterns. Meals served at precisely determined intervals may not accommodate natural variations in appetite. Court sessions scheduled according to mechanical hours may not allow sufficient time for complex deliberations. The attempt to force human activity into mechanically uniform intervals sometimes creates its own inefficiencies and frustrations. Moreover, The mechanical clock's independence from natural time creates a subtle but significant disconnection from seasonal and environmental patterns. In the village, work rhythms naturally adjust to summer's long days and winter's short ones, to spring's burst of energy and autumn's preparation for dormancy. But mechanical time recognizes no such variations. Its hours remain identical regardless of season, weather, or natural cycle. As evening approaches in Lord Heinrich's castle, you can observe this disconnection most clearly. The mechanical clock continues its steady marking of equal hours even as the natural world settles into the organic rhythms of approaching night. Outside the castle walls, villagers prepare for rest according to internal and environmental cues: the quality of light, the temperature of air, the completion of daily tasks. Inside the castle, activities continue according to artificial schedules that may have little relationship to human or natural needs. The great clock strikes the hour of Compline, its bronze bells rolling across the darkening countryside. In the village below, some people pause in their evening activities, automatically counting the strokes that now help organize their days. But others, absorbed in conversation or work or family life, barely notice the mechanical announcement of temporal passage. This scene captures the fundamental transformation that mechanical timekeeping brings to human experience. Time becomes something external to human life rather than integral to it, something imposed rather than organic, something counted rather than felt. The wealthy who own these remarkable devices gain precision and coordination, but they also accept a new form of temporal discipline that separates them from the natural rhythms that have guided human life since the beginning. As you prepare to leave this world of emerging mechanical precision, you carry with you an understanding of how technological innovation becomes social transformation. The mechanical clock, invented to serve the practical needs of monastic prayer, has become an instrument of social distinction, political control, and economic coordination. What began as a tool has become a master, reshaping human relationships, not just with time, but with each other and with the natural world. The steady tick of gears and escapements follows you as you drift away from Lord Heinrich's castle, a sound that will grow ever more insistent in human ears, eventually becoming so pervasive that future generations will barely remember what life was like when time moved at the pace of breath and heartbeat, season and sunlight, rather than to the relentless rhythm of artificial precision. Yet beneath the mechanical counting, if you listen carefully, you can still hear the older rhythms, the whisper of wind through grain fields, the patient lowing of cattle settling for the night, the soft breathing of those who sleep without reference to the measured intervals that increasingly govern waking life. These natural rhythms persist, though they must now compete with the mechanical pulse that humanity has imposed upon the flow of temporal experience. As the bronze bells of Lord Heinrich's castle fade into the distance of memory, let yourself drift gently forward through the centuries that follow, watching the quiet revolution of mechanical time transform human civilization in ways its creators could never have imagined. The steady tick of gears and escapements grows ever more insistent, spreading from monastery towers to castle walls, from merchant halls to common homes, until the sound becomes so fundamental to human experience that silence itself takes on new meaning. You have journeyed with us from a world where time moved like a river, flowing, organic, responsive to the natural rhythms that governed all life, to the threshold of an age where time would be divided, counted, owned, and controlled. In the medieval village, you experience life lived according to the patient cycles of sun and season, work and rest, where each day unfolded according to its own internal logic rather than external demands. The bells that marked prayer times were gentle suggestions rather than mechanical commands, and the rhythm of life breathed with human and natural variation. In the monastery workshop, you witnessed the moment when human ingenuity first captured time in gears and springs, when Brother Gerhardus and his fellow craftsmen sought to serve God through mechanical precision, never fully understanding that they were creating something that would reshape the relationship between humanity and duration itself. The quiet tick of the first mechanical clocks seemed innocent enough, a tool for more accurate prayer, a way to ensure that spiritual discipline followed proper intervals. Through ancient civilizations, you explored humanity's earlier attempts to measure time, the patient shadow of Egyptian sundials, the gentle drip of Babylonian water clocks, the fragrant spiral of Chinese incense timepieces. These devices worked with natural processes rather than against them, accepting variability as part of temporal experience, creating measurement systems that remained connected to the cosmic rhythms they sought to track. In the castle of Lord Heinrich, you saw how mechanical timekeeping became something more than mere measurement, how it transformed into an instrument of social control, economic coordination, and political power. The ability to own time, to impose mechanical rhythm on human activity, created new forms of hierarchy and new kinds of dependency. The wealthy could afford precision, while the poor remained subject to natural variation, creating temporal inequality that reflected and reinforced social stratification. Now, as you settle into the comfort of your modern rest, consider the extraordinary journey that brought us from those ancient shadow sticks to the digital displays that surround our contemporary lives. The revolution that began in medieval monasteries continued through Renaissance workshops, Enlightenment factories, and industrial age mass production, until mechanical precision became so pervasive that we can barely imagine life organized according to any other principle. The irony is profound and gentle. In seeking to capture time, to make it reliable and precise, humanity created something that often seems to capture us instead. The natural rhythms that governed your medieval village ancestors, the expansion and contraction of days with seasons, the variation of work intensity with weather and energy, the organic flow of activity according to immediate needs. These have been largely replaced by the artificial regularity of mechanical schedule. Yet something essential persists. As you lie in your comfortable bed, your body still follows rhythms older than any clock. The slow cycling of sleep and waking, the patient rhythm of breath and heartbeat, the seasonal adjustments of energy and mood that connect you to ancestors who lived entirely according to natural time. Your dreams unfold without reference to measured intervals, flowing according to their own mysterious logic, reminding you that consciousness itself remains fundamentally connected to temporal patterns that no mechanical device can fully capture or control. The story of human timekeeping is ultimately a story of the tension between our desire for control and our need for connection, control over the forces that govern our lives, connection to the natural rhythms that make life meaningful. The mechanical precision that began in medieval monasteries gave us coordination, efficiency, and the ability to synchronize complex activities across vast distances. But it also created a kind of temporal exile, separating us from the organic flows that once integrated human activity with cosmic pattern. Perhaps the greatest gift of understanding this history is the recognition that our relationship with time remains a choice, even in an age of digital precision and global synchronization. The village rhythms that governed your ancestors' lives haven't disappeared entirely. They persist in the background of modern existence, available to anyone willing to listen beneath the surface of mechanical measurement. When you wake naturally, without an alarm, you participate in the same solar relationship that guided medieval farmers. When you adjust your activity level according to seasonal energy, you connect with patterns that governed ancient civilizations. When you allow conversations to expand according to their own organic logic, rather than predetermined schedules, you touch something that mechanical time cannot capture. The clocks that change time also changed us, but they need not define us entirely. In sleep, in dreams, in moments of deep absorption, in times when we lose track of measured intervals and discover ourselves living according to internal rather than external rhythm. In these experiences, we return to temporal relationships that precede all mechanical innovation. The gentle tick of countless timepieces continues around us, marking our days with unprecedented precision. But underneath that mechanical pulse, if we listen carefully, we can still hear the older rhythms, the whisper of breath, the patient beating of the heart, the seasonal turning of the earth itself. These natural timekeepers persist, offering us connection to temporal patterns that mechanical devices can measure, but never fully capture. As you drift towards sleep, let yourself release the measured intervals that have governed your day. Allow your breathing to find its own rhythm, your thoughts to flow according to their own internal logic. In sleep, you return to the temporal relationship that guided human life for millennia before mechanical precision. Time as experience rather than measurement, duration as participation rather than counting, rhythm as connection rather than control. The revolution that began with Brother Gerhardus's gears continues around us, but it need not define our deepest relationship with time itself. In dreams, we return to the village where bells are gentle suggestions rather than mechanical demands, where time moves like a river rather than a series of discrete drops, where the rhythm of life breathes with variations that no clock can capture. Rest well in this ancient rhythm, this older time that persists beneath all mechanical measurement, connecting you to every generation that has found peace in the patient cycles that govern all life. The clocks that change time could not change this fundamental pattern. The daily return to rest, the nightly release from measured intervals, the eternal rhythm of waking and sleeping that makes us human. Let the gentle tick of history fade into silence, and discover in sleep the timeless rhythms that no revolution can alter. The temporal peace that belongs to every human being regardless of the age in which they live. In dreams, time becomes once again what it always was beneath all our attempts to capture it, not a river to be measured, but an ocean in which to rest.